My name's Isabella, and I'm 21 years old. I just finished my third year at art college, and let me tell you, it's been one hell of a ride. But before I get into all that, you need to know where I come from. I grew up in a house where I never felt at home. My parents, Tom and Sarah, always made it clear that my older sister, Emily, was their golden child. She's 4 years older than me and has always been a thorn in my side. From the day I was born, Emily seemed to hate me. She'd tease me, break my toys, and make my life miserable. And my parents? They'd just laugh it off, saying, "Oh, that's just how sisters are." But it wasn't normal. I remember when I was 14, I had this huge crush on a boy at school. His name was Jake, and I thought he was the cutest thing ever. I'd spend hours drawing portraits of him in secret, hiding them under my mattress where I thought no one would find them. But Emily found them. And you know what she did? She pinned them up on the school bulletin board for everyone to see. I still remember walking into school that day. The laughter, the pointing, the whispers. It felt like the whole world was crashing down around me. And Jake? He came up to me, all awkward and stuttering. Isabella. I saw the drawings. Look, you're nice and all, but I don't like you that way. I ran home crying that day. My parents were in the kitchen when I burst through the door, tears streaming down my face. Mom, Dad, Emily humiliated me at school. She found my private drawings in. But before I could finish, Emily waltzed in, a smug grin on her face. "Oh, come on, Izzy," she said, using the nickname I hated. "It was just a bit of fun. Not my fault you can't take a joke." And you know what my parents did? They laughed. They actually laughed. "Sweetie," my mom said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes, "you really need to toughen up. It's not Emily's fault you're such a crybaby." That's why, when I got accepted into art college, I was over the moon. It was my ticket out of that house, away from the constant mockery and belittlement. My grandmother was the only one who ever showed me any real love. She was the one who encouraged my art, who told me I had talent. When I got accepted, she insisted on paying for my tuition. "Isabella," she said, her eyes twinkling, "you've got a gift. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I'll make sure you get the education you deserve." For 3 years, she paid for everything. My tuition, my supplies, even some extra for living expenses. But then, just before my final year, she got sick. I remember sitting by her bedside, holding her frail hand. She looked at me with those kind eyes of hers and said, "Isabella, my dear, I'm so proud of you. You're going to do great things." Then she turned to my parents, who were standing at the foot of the bed. "Tom, Sarah, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll pay for Isabella's final year. She needs to finish her education." My parents nodded solemnly. "Of course, Mom," my dad said. "We promise." Grandma died a week later. At the reading of her will, we found out she'd left her house to my parents and her jewelry to Emily and me. Emily, of course, immediately grabbed the diamond tiara. "I'll take this," she announced. "Isabella can have the ring. She doesn't care about jewelry anyway, right, Izzy?" I didn't argue. She was right, I didn't care much for jewelry. So I took the diamond ring and put it in a safety deposit box at the bank. I made friends quickly in college. There was Zoe, a punk rocker with a talent for abstract art, and Marcus, a quiet guy who could make sculptures that took your breath away. They didn't care about my family drama. To them, I was just Isabella, the girl who could paint like nobody's business. "Hey, Bella," Zoe said one day, using the nickname I actually liked. "There's a tattoo parlor downtown looking for someone to draw designs. You should apply." I was hesitant at first. My parents would flip if they knew I was working in a tattoo parlor. But then I thought, why should I care what they think? So I applied, and to my surprise, I got the job. The owner, a burly guy named Mike with more ink than skin, took one look at my portfolio and said, "You're hired, kid." For the first time in my life, I was earning my own money. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I didn't tell my parents or Emily about it. I could already hear Emily's mocking voice. "Oh, little Izzy's drawing pictures for thugs now? How cute." College life suited me. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make my grandmother proud. My professors praised my work, and I even won a few small competitions. But more importantly, I was happy. The years flew by, and before I knew it, I was finishing up my third year. As the summer break approached, a familiar dread settled in my stomach. I had to go home. I opened the door and stepped into chaos. The living room was full of people, all bustling about with excitement. In the center of it all stood Emily, beaming as she held up a white dress. My mother noticed me first. "Oh, Isabella," she said, her smile faltering slightly. "You're home. We weren't expecting you so soon." I stood there, stunned. "Emily's getting married? When did this happen?" Emily turned to me, her smile turning into a smirk. "Oh, didn't anyone tell you? I guess we've all been so busy with the preparations, it must have slipped our minds." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My own sister was getting married, and no one had even bothered to tell me. "Who's the lucky guy?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is Richard," Emily said, pulling forward a tall, handsome man I hadn't noticed before. "Isn't he dreamy?" Richard gave me a polite smile and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Isabella. I've heard so much about you." I shook his hand, wondering what exactly he'd heard. Knowing Emily, probably nothing good. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of excited chatter downstairs. Emily was holding court at the breakfast table, surrounded by our parents and a couple of her bridesmaids. As I listened to their conversation, I learned that Emily had broken up with her previous boyfriend at our parents' insistence. Apparently, he'd been mixed up with some dangerous crowd. "Thank God you listened to us, sweetie," Mom said, patting Emily's hand. "Richard is such a better match for you. And his family is so well off." I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Of course, that's what they cared about. "Speaking of Richard," Emily said, turning to me with a smirk, "he's taking me out to dinner tonight. Not that you'd know anything about that, right, Izzy? Still haven't found a boyfriend?" They all laughed, and I gripped my coffee mug tighter, willing myself not to cry. Some things never change. As the days passed, I tried to stay out of everyone's way. I spent most of my time in my room, sketching and counting down the days until I could leave. But one evening, I couldn't avoid the family dinner. We were all seated around the table when Emily dropped her bombshell. "I've decided to wear Grandma's tiara for the wedding," she announced. "It'll look perfect with my dress." "Oh, that's a wonderful idea," Mom exclaimed. Emily wasn't done. "But you know what would make it even better? If I had a matching piece to go with it. Like, oh, I don't know, a ring?" I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. I knew exactly where this was going. Mom's eyes lit up. "Oh, that's right. Isabella, didn't Grandma leave you a ring?" I nodded slowly, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. "Well, there you go," Emily said, clapping her hands together. "Izzy, you'll let me borrow the ring for the wedding, won't you?" I put down my fork. "Borrow? For how long?" Emily laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, silly Izzy. I mean, you'll give it to me. For keeps." But Grandma left that to me," I protested weakly. "Come on, Isabella," Dad said, his voice stern. "Don't be selfish. It's your sister's wedding day." I looked around the table, hoping to see someone, anyone, on my side. But all I saw were expectant faces, waiting for me to give in. Like always. "Isabella," Dad said, his voice cold. "Either you give the ring to your sister, or we won't pay for your final year of college." The room fell silent. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But But you promised Grandma, I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. Emily let out a harsh laugh. Oh, please. No one cares about promises made to some half-witted old woman. I stood up so fast, my chair fell over. How dare you talk about Grandma like that? I shouted. That's enough, Dad roared. Isabella, you have a choice to make. The ring or your education. Decide. I looked at their faces, Dad's anger, Mom's disappointment, Emily's smug satisfaction. In that moment, I knew I had lost. Again. With shaking hands, I took off the necklace where I kept the key to my safety deposit box. I handed it to Emily. The morning after the ring incident, I cornered Emily in the kitchen. When exactly is your wedding? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emily looked up from her coffee, a sly smile playing on her lips. It's on the 29th. Why, planning to ruin it? I ignored her jab. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to get away from this toxic environment. No, I replied coolly. I'm going to visit a friend from college. I'll be back in time for the wedding. I packed my bags and left that afternoon, heading to my friend Zoe's place in the next city over. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Zoe and I spent the week exploring art galleries, hitting up local cafes, and just enjoying each other's company. It was exactly what I needed. But my moment of peace was shattered exactly 1 week later. I was scrolling through my social media feed when I saw it, photos of Emily's wedding. My sister, resplendent in white, the diamond tiara glittering on her head, and my ring sparkling on her finger. The caption read, "Just married. Off to the Maldives with my hunky husband." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. With shaking hands, I dialed Mom's number. Why didn't you invite me to the wedding? Emily told me the wrong date. There was a long pause. Then Dad's voice came on the line. Isabella, your sister, she didn't want you there. She said you'd ruin her perfect day. We thought it was best not to tell you. I felt like I was going to be sick. How could you do this to me? I'm your daughter too. Don't be dramatic, Mom chimed in. It's not like you really wanted to be there anyway, right? I hung up, my whole body shaking with anger and hurt. A few days later, I returned home, only to find Emily had also returned from her honeymoon. I walked into the living room to find her, Mom, and Dad huddled together, looking at apartment listings. I cleared my throat, and they all looked up. Don't forget about my tuition, I said, my voice small. You promised to pay for my last year if I gave Emily the ring. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Actually, Isabella, we've decided to use that money as a down payment on Emily's apartment instead. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. But you promised. You swore to Grandma. Plans change, Mom said dismissively. Emily needs it more. I'm sure you can figure something out. Emily was still laughing, a cruel, mocking sound that made my blood boil. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged at her, grabbing a fistful of her hair. Emily screeched, and suddenly everyone was shouting. Dad yanked me away, his face red with anger. That's enough, he roared. Isabella, get out of this house right now. I ran to my room, threw some clothes in a bag, and stormed out, slamming the front door behind me. As I walked away from the house, my heart pounding and my cheeks wet with tears, I realized something. I found myself back at Zoe's place, feeling lost and broken. For days, I barely left her guest room, alternating between crying and staring blankly at the walls. Zoe tried her best to comfort me, but I was inconsolable. A week passed in this haze of despair. Then, one morning, as I listlessly checked my emails, I saw a message that made my heart stop. Congratulations! You are the winner of the annual art school competition. Your prize includes a full scholarship for your final year of studies. I read the email 3 times, not believing my eyes. Then I let out a scream that brought Zoe running. I thrust my phone at her, happy tears streaming down my face. I won. I won a scholarship. I can finish school. Zoe's eyes widened as she read the email, then she pulled me into a bone-crushing hug. "Oh my God, Bella. This is amazing." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I could finish my degree without my parents' help. I could make my own way. When the new semester started, I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor. Between my classes and my part-time job at the tattoo parlor, I barely had time to think about my family drama. Months passed, and I slowly started to heal. One day, I was hanging out with my classmate, Jake, who worked part-time at a local pawn shop. We were chatting about our day when he mentioned something that caught my attention. "You won't believe what happened during my shift today," he said. "This girl came in with the most beautiful diamond necklace and ring I've ever seen. Must have been worth a fortune." My heart skipped a beat. "What did she look like?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Jake described a woman who sounded exactly like Emily. "Can you draw the jewelry for me?" I asked, my hands shaking slightly. Jake looked confused, but complied. As I watched him sketch, my suspicions were confirmed. The necklace was the one Emily had always bragged about, and the ring, it was my grandmother's ring. "Jake," I said, my mouth dry, "is there any way you could get me the security footage from the pawn shop?" Jake must have seen the desperation in my eyes because he finally nodded. "Okay, I'll see what I can do." A few days later, Jake handed me a USB drive. "Here," he said. "But you didn't get this from me, okay?" I nodded gratefully and rushed back to my dorm room. With trembling hands, I plugged in the drive and opened the video file. There was Emily, clear as day, handing over the jewelry. But what made my jaw drop was what happened next. As she turned to leave, a man entered the frame. Emily threw her arms around him, kissing him passionately. It wasn't Richard. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart pounding. As the man turned slightly, I gasped. I recognized him. It was Emily's ex-boyfriend, the one our parents had made her break up with because of his criminal connections. I sat back, my mind reeling. Emily had pawned her precious jewelry, including my grandmother's ring, and was apparently cheating on her husband with her criminal ex-boyfriend. Part of me wanted to immediately send this video to my parents, to Richard, to everyone who had ever believed Emily's lies. But another part of me hesitated. This was big. Too big to act on impulsively. Months passed, and I thought I'd put my family drama behind me. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Lisa, my mom's sister. "Isabella, darling, I have wonderful news," she chirped, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Your sister is pregnant. Can you believe it? They're having a big announcement party next week. Isn't it exciting?" My heart sank. Of course, another family event I hadn't been invited to. "That's great, Aunt Lisa. Thanks for letting me know." After hanging up, I sat on my bed, conflicted. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue cutting ties with my toxic family. But another part of me, the part that still held on to the video from the pawn shop, knew this might be my chance. A week later, I found myself standing outside my parents' house. Cars lined the street, and I could hear laughter and chatter from inside. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Mom opened the door, her smile instantly fading when she saw me. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" Pushing past her, I walked into the living room. The chatter died down as people noticed me. Emily, standing in the center of the room with Richard, looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What is she doing here?" Emily hissed. Dad's voice boomed through the room. "Isabella, get out of this house immediately. You're not welcome here." Confused murmurs rippled through the guests. I saw Richard's parents exchange worried glances. Mom, always one for saving face, plastered on a fake smile. "I'm so sorry, everyone. We've had to distance ourselves from Isabella. She's become quite greedy and unworthy of our family name." The room erupted into arguments. Some relatives defended me, while others sided with my parents. I raised my voice. "I have something to say." Gradually, the room quieted down. All eyes were on me. I turned to Emily. "Congratulations on your pregnancy, sis. But I have to ask, why aren't you wearing Grandma's tiara and ring?" Emily's face went pale. Her mother-in-law spoke up, "Now that you mention it, I haven't seen that beautiful ring in a while." "Emily, dear, where is it?" Emily stuttered, I sent them for restoration. They needed cleaning." I nodded slowly, pulling out my phone. "That's interesting. Because I have a video here that tells a different story." The color drained from Emily's face as I connected my phone to the TV. The security footage from the pawnshop began to play. There was Emily, clear as day, pawning the jewelry. And then, the moment that made everyone in the room gasp, Emily, throwing herself into the arms of a man who was definitely not Richard, kissing him passionately. The moment the video ended, chaos erupted in the living room. Richard's face contorted with rage and pain as he turned to Emily. "Emily, what is this? Who is that man?" he shouted, his voice cracking. Emily burst into tears, mascara streaming down her face. I can explain." Richard's mother stepped forward, her voice ice cold. "I think we all deserve an explanation, Emily." Richard's father, a stern-looking man, spoke up. "I think we need a paternity test." Immediately. As accusations flew and tempers flared, I quietly slipped out of the house. I had done what I came to do. The truth was out, and for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of Emily's deception came to light. Through the family grapevine, I learned that she had been secretly meeting her ex-boyfriend, the one with criminal connections, behind Richard's back. She had been spending Richard's money on him and even pawned her jewelry to pay off his debts. The paternity test results were the final nail in the coffin. The baby wasn't Richard's, it was her ex-boyfriend's. Richard, understandably devastated, filed for divorce. He sued Emily for a substantial sum, citing emotional damages and financial fraud. Her ex-boyfriend, upon learning of the pregnancy, vanished without a trace, leaving Emily to face the consequences alone. My parents, who had always put Emily on a pedestal, were forced to face the harsh reality of her actions. They had to take out a significant loan to help Emily pay the compensation Richard demanded. Their golden child had fallen from grace, and they were left to pick up the pieces. In a twisted turn of events, they tried to blame me for everything. Mom left a voicemail on my phone, her voice bitter and accusing. "Are you happy now, Isabella? You've ruined your sister's life. I hope you're proud of yourself." I deleted the message without responding. Their words no longer had the power to hurt me. As for me, I returned to college, threw myself into my studies, and focused on building the life I wanted. I cut off all communication with my family, changing my phone number and email address. The toxic cycle was finally broken. It's been 2 years since that fateful day when I exposed Emily's lies. I graduated from art college with honors, my final project earning praise from both professors and local art critics. Now, at 23, I'm working at the Harmony Art Gallery in the city. It's a dream come true, surrounded by beautiful artwork every day, helping to curate exhibitions, and even organizing events for up-and-coming artists. But that's not all. I've been painting in my free time, and to my surprise and delight, my work has caught the eye of several collectors. I haven't forgotten my roots, though. I still create tattoo sketches in my spare time. It's become a cherished hobby, a link to the past that reminds me of how far I've come. Some of my designs have even been featured in tattoo magazines, which never fails to make me smile. As for my family, well, that's a complicated story. I've maintained relationships with a few aunts and cousins who stood by me during the fallout. They keep me updated on the family drama, though I try not to let it affect me anymore. From what I hear, Emily is still living with our parents. She's unemployed, struggling to raise her child alone. Mom and Dad, facing financial troubles of their own, are constantly pressuring her to find a job and move out. The arguments are frequent and bitter, I'm told. I haven't spoken to my parents or Emily since that day. They tried reaching out a few times in the beginning, guilt-tripping messages, angry voicemails, but I stood firm in my decision to cut ties. Eventually, they stopped trying. On a brighter note, I've been dating a wonderful guy named Alex for the past year. He's a graphic designer I met at a gallery event. He's kind, supportive, and best of all, he understands my passion for art. We're talking about moving in together soon, another step towards building the life I want.